That morning, at a small elementary school in the state of Michigan, began like any other day, until in just a few brief minutes, an irreversible tragedy unfolded, leaving the entire community forever stripped of the sense of peace it once knew.
First tonight, he was 6 years old when he shot his first-grade classmate, Kayla Rolland, at their school near Flint. At the time, he was the youngest known killer in the U.S.
So what truly happened within the hallways of that school? Kayla Rolland was born on May 12, 1993, in the town of Mount Morris, Michigan, United States. She was the youngest child of Ricky Rolland and Veronica Ann Lafayette Rolland, with an older sister, Elizabeth, and an older brother, Jonathan. And although her parents' marriage fell apart early, leading Veronica to separate from Ricky not long after Kayla was born, their children still grew up together in a small home with limited but relatively stable financial conditions, a place where the siblings were closely bonded, sharing care and support like truly devoted brothers and sisters, seemingly unaware of the struggles faced by the adults around them, and alongside 3 family dogs. Kayla's childhood passed in a simple, quiet environment. By the late 1990s, Kayla Rolland was described by those around her as a gentle and sensitive child who regularly took part in religious activities with her family and had a habit of praying before lunch. She loved playing with Barbie dolls and watching the children's television program Barney. And according to her babysitter at the time, Kayla had a warm, caring personality and once expressed a desire to become a doctor in the future. Yet alongside this gentleness, she also showed a stronger, more adventurous side, enjoying playing in the mud, digging in the dirt, and not shying away from challenges. During this same period, Kayla attended Buell Elementary School in the Beecher area, where her brother Jonathan was also a student. And there she quickly demonstrated an ability to learn, becoming one of the strongest readers in her first-grade class, despite being quite shy. Notably, the school was located in a neighborhood facing significant economic hardship, with high unemployment and ongoing issues related to the use of harmful substances within the community. A complex social environment that, at the time, most children, including Kayla, were still too young to fully understand the potential risks surrounding them. Within the community of roughly 23,000 residents where Buell Elementary School was located, more than 80% of students qualified for the federally funded school lunch program, a figure that clearly reflected the widespread economic hardship faced by families in the Beecher area of Michigan. And in Kayla's classroom, there was also a young boy for whom that lack of stability had become a familiar reality from a very early age, while the Rolland family was far from affluent. The living conditions of a boy named Dedrick Darnell Owens were far more precarious, as he was the son of Tamara Owens and Dedrick Owens Sr. And the childhoods of the 2 siblings were deeply shaped by issues related to the use of harmful substances by the adults around them, with their mother having previously encountered legal trouble that resulted in the children being placed temporarily in a group care facility before being returned to the family, while their father was convicted of theft-related offenses and crimes involving prohibited substances intended for distribution, leading to his incarceration when Dedrick was still very young. And as a result, the children were raised by their mother alone under extremely limited financial conditions, relying on approximately $175 per week in assistance from Michigan state welfare programs. And according to documented records, Tamara frequently experienced high levels of stress, was prone to anger, and often directed her frustrations toward her children, with the only close relative remaining involved in their lives being an uncle, Marcus Winfrey, a man in his early 20s who, despite caring for his nephews, was also connected to unlawful activities within the environment the children were exposed to on a daily basis. In contrast, Marcus Winfrey maintained a close relationship with Jamel Andrew James, a man he shared a home with, and Dedrick and his brother became familiar with Jamel early on, even viewing him as another uncle figure in their everyday environment. However, evidence later showed that the house shared by the two men was frequently a site of unlawful exchanges, particularly those involving harmful substances. And within that context, dangerous items were at times used as a form of trade, something multiple neighbors later confirmed when they reported hearing sounds resembling explosions coming from the house. And shortly before Christmas 1999, Jamel was known to possess two dangerous weapons, one handheld and one intended for hunting, with the handheld weapon having been reported missing to law enforcement in the town of Mount Morris, Michigan, during December of that same year, underscoring the serious risks that existed within the very living space the children were regularly exposed to. Against this backdrop of an unstable living environment, Dedrick began showing behavioral problems at Buell Elementary School at a very early age, with incidents occurring so frequently that he was kept after school almost every day to work one-on-one with teachers. These behaviors included the use of harsh language, aggressive gestures, and physical conflicts with classmates, gradually leading school staff to classify him as a high-risk student requiring close monitoring, while at the same time peers regularly teased and avoided him, deepening his sense of isolation. And in response to the situation, the school's faculty committee decided to place him in an early intervention counseling program aimed at addressing behavioral issues and providing psychological support, in the hope of redirecting his development while he was still very young. With most records related to this process sealed in accordance with regulations to protect the privacy rights of a child not yet legally accountable. However, during the period from late 1999 into early 2000, real-world signs showed that the school's early intervention program brought little measurable improvement, as Dedrick continued to be involved in multiple serious incidents, including one occasion in which he caused injury to a classmate using a school supply. Another student, Chris Boas, who was 7 years old at the time, later recalled being pushed and hurt by Dedrick simply for refusing to share food. And among the students affected by these aggressive behaviors was Kayla herself, who had previously experienced a direct confrontation with him. And by late January and early February of 2000, Dedrick was temporarily suspended from school for several days due to ongoing conflicts. Not long afterward, his family situation deteriorated further when Tamara could no longer afford rent and was forced to leave her housing, subsequently slipping back into a state of personal instability and leaving her two sons in the care of Marcus, where the boys were made to sleep together on a cramped couch in an unsafe living environment. While Jamel would at times appear in the home carrying dangerous items and engaging in behavior framed as joking but laden with risk. And amid both material deprivation and a lack of adult supervision, these items gradually became a form of dangerous fascination for the imagination of Dedrick, who was then 6 years old, and his brother, who was 8. Notably, neither Marcus nor Jamel took any steps to secure them, as the dangerous item was left inside an open shoebox in Jamel's room. And at some unknown point, Dedrick discovered it beneath a pile of blankets, still in a condition capable of causing serious consequences. On Monday, February 28, 2000, at Buell Elementary School in the Beecher area of Michigan, Dedrick crossed a clear boundary with Kayla in a school hallway, and when the girl firmly rejected his behavior, he responded with verbally insulting remarks. Early the following morning, Tuesday, February 29th, Diedrich and his brother were again involved in a conflict with a classmate named Chris, during which Diedrich made a threat involving the use of a dangerous item, and later that same day, Kayla, then just 6 years old, arrived at school as usual with her brother Jonathan and her sister Elizabeth. And after saying goodbye to them, she walked into what appeared to be an entirely ordinary school day. And when one class period ended, most first-grade students lined up in the hallway to move to their next classroom, while several children remained behind, including Kayla, as the classroom teacher. Alicia Judd stepped out briefly to monitor order in the hallway. And in that short window, Diedrich approached Kayla and told her that he did not like her. But Kayla turned her back, signaling disinterest. And moments later, Diedrich produced a dangerous item concealed on his person and caused a serious incident. The sound echoing throughout the school, which many later recalled as resembling the pop of a balloon, a noise not unfamiliar in an elementary school setting, to the point that even Jonathan, Kayla's brother, remembered thinking the same thing when reflecting on the moment years later.
I remember actually hearing the gunshot because it sounded like a chair hit a wall.
But that sound did not come from a harmless joke. It was the result of a serious incident in which the dangerous item caused injury through Kayla's right arm and damaged a critical blood vessel. And almost immediately, a red stain began to spread across her sweater. And in that moment of confusion, Kayla whispered to a classmate that she did not feel well before collapsing onto the floor. The unfamiliar noise and sudden chaos prompted Alicia Judd to rush back into the classroom, where she found her student lying motionless with clear signs of injury, and she immediately placed a call to 911, and although her voice trembled and caught with panic, the operators on the other end of the line were still unable to grasp the full magnitude of the tragedy that had just unfolded inside an elementary school in Michigan that morning. As chaos overtook the classroom, Diedrich left the dangerous item on a student desk before exiting the room and running into a nearby restroom, where he was found moments later by a teacher, curled up in a corner, and was quickly turned over to school administrators. While inside the classroom, Alicia Judd struggled to remain calm as she stayed on the line with the 911 dispatcher, explaining that she had once received training in breathing support, but could no longer recall the exact steps. And when asked about the child's condition, she hesitated, fearful of moving Kayla's small body. Just then, Kayla began showing alarming reactions, as Alicia observed her trying to breathe while being unable to clearly detect a pulse. And after a few seconds of hesitation, she began providing breathing assistance under direct guidance from the dispatcher, forcing herself to stay composed in an overwhelmingly tense moment. After a short time, she sensed extremely faint signs of life, but noticed Kayla was not breathing regularly. And only minutes later, emergency medical personnel arrived, administered urgent aid, and swiftly transported Kayla from Buell Elementary School to Hurley Medical Center in a final effort to preserve the young girl's life. Immediately afterward, Diedrich was taken into temporary custody by law enforcement at the scene, while all students at Buell Elementary School were quickly evacuated, placed onto buses, and transported to a church located across the street to reunite with their families. And in that moment, for many parents, simply being able to hold their children in their arms became an overwhelming mixture of relief and shock that was difficult to put into words. At the same time, in the emergency room at Hurley Medical Center in Flint, Michigan, Dr. Michael Jaggi was on duty that morning, and upon receiving word of a pediatric patient in extremely critical condition, He immediately assembled the medical team, with several staff members initially struggling to believe the reported age of the patient and suspecting there had been some kind of mistake, because it was almost impossible to comprehend that a child just 6 years old was being brought in fighting for her life as the result of a dangerous item. But when the reality became unmistakably clear, disbelief gave way to a heavy, collective shock. There was no time left for symbolic gestures or fragile hope, only the tense silence of the emergency room. And at 10:29 a.m. on Tuesday, February 29th, 2000, Kayla Rolland was pronounced deceased, bringing to a close a mourning that the community of Beecher would never be able to forget.
February of 2000, 6-year-old Kayla Rolland was shot and killed at Buell Elementary in Mount Morris Township by a 6-year-old classmate who found the gun in a shoebox at his uncle's house. The owner of the gun pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter. The boy was never charged.
The prosecutor at the time remembers the case as though one could ever forget, and he tells TV5's Jamie Sherrod the U.S. needs to take a tougher stand on guns.
The community was traumatized by the shooting death of Kayla Rolland. They couldn't make sense of it.
In February of 2000, a school shooting that made national news happened in Mount Morris Township at Buell Elementary.
And a 6-year-old classmate brought a gun to school, took it to school, and shot and killed her in the classroom.
Kayla Rolland was just 6 years old. The incident leaving her family, the community, and nation grieving. Arthur Bush, the Genesee County prosecutor at the time, remembers the mood of the country.
During that period of time, there was a great debate in America about gun control and whether or not there should be an extension of the assault weapons ban.
The ban signed into law in 1994, but ended 10 years later because of a sunset provision. Fast forward to today, the nation is still trying to make sense of shootings at schools and public places. Last week, 8 people were shot to death at Atlanta area massage parlors. And last night, 10 people were killed at a Boulder, Colorado supermarket.
These shootings have been a parade nonstop almost ever since that ban went out of effect.
Bush acknowledges some progress in preventing school shootings.
We're much better prepared for what might happen in a school, either through prevention, keeping people from bringing guns into school and so on.
But he believes the U.S. needs stronger laws to prevent the kind of carnage that erupted in Boulder and other cities.
There's no reason not to have laws on the books that say that if you're going to buy a gun, you're going to have to get checked out. You're going to have to qualify, especially if you've had a mental health history.
He says powerful assault weapons need to be banned, or else the shootings will continue and the nation will become numb to the numbers. I'm Jamie Sherrod, WNEM TV5.
When Veronica arrived at Hurley Medical Center with her 2 remaining children, medical staff were forced to deliver the devastating news of Kayla's passing to the family, and the mother's reaction immediately shattered the already heavy atmosphere of the hospital as cries of anguish echoed through the hallways, while Elizabeth, unable to fully process the reality she had just been told, ran straight into the room where Kayla Rolland lay motionless, desperately searching for even the faintest sign that could deny what had just happened. And in that moment, the irreversible loss suffered by the Rolland family was sealed, deepening the emotional shock for everyone who witnessed it and marking the beginning of a long, enduring period of grief that would follow all those whose lives had been forever touched by Kayla Rolland.
When they said that she was dead, and I remember looking at her and she was white, and I just kept looking at her and I'm like, Kayla, you're playing a joke on us, just wake up. Kayla, just wake up. And she didn't.
On Tuesday, February 29th, 2000, a rare leap day, Kayla, a 6-year-old girl whose blue eyes had often been described as a symbol of innocence, became the youngest recorded case of a child's death at an educational facility in the United States involving a dangerous item, and within a short span of time, the incident rapidly appeared across news broadcasts, plunging the Rolland family and the community of Beecher, Michigan, into shock and mourning. While many parents at the time knew only that the incident involved a dangerous item and were still unaware of the identity of the person responsible. Meanwhile, at the detention facility of Genesee County, Dedrick Owens Sr. was listening to the news on the radio, and the moment he heard the name Buell Elementary School mentioned, he immediately sensed that something was wrong. Yet he could not prepare himself for the harsh reality that his son was involved not as a victim, but as the one who caused the tragedy. And afterward, he issued an apology on his son's behalf and admitted that up to that point, he had been completely unaware of the conditions in which his children were living. Outside the school grounds, flowers, handwritten letters, and personal items were quickly placed together to form a temporary memorial for Kayla Rolland, with messages on the doors expressing love for children and pledges to protect them more carefully. When Tamara was fully informed of what had happened, she fell into a severe emotional crisis. While Dedrick remained in temporary custody, awaiting a decision from the Genesee County Family Independence Agency. And during interviews with law enforcement, he showed neither panic nor a clear understanding of the gravity of the situation, instead perceiving it as a childish act of mischief, before quietly sitting and scribbling drawings on the sheet of paper given to him in the interview room. Later, Eric King, the local sheriff, stated that within the immature perception of a child, Dedrick viewed the world through the lens of television, where everything seemed reversible and people did not truly disappear forever. And it was this distorted understanding that led the case to be recorded as the youngest instance of a child ever causing a severe tragedy within a school setting in the United States. Afterward, both Dedrick and his brother were placed into substitute care under the supervision of a distant relative, while Buell Elementary School temporarily suspended classes but remained open so students and teachers could access psychological counseling services. The school district also proactively sent teachers and counselors to the homes of approximately 20 students from the same class, including 5 children who had directly witnessed the moment the incident occurred. And only a few days later, more than 100 parents, gripped by anger and fear, attended an emergency meeting of the Board of Education, collectively demanding stronger safety measures such as tighter access control and the installation of surveillance systems. A few days after the tragedy, leaders of the school district serving the working-class area just north of the city of Flint made efforts to reassure parents that it was safe for children to return to Buell Elementary School. And during a press conference, Ira Rutherford, the director of the Beecher Public School System, emphasized that she viewed the incident as a rare anomaly that did not reflect the broader reality of the school environment. However, this position did little to ease the anxiety of many parents, who continued to voice opposition rooted in a lingering sense of insecurity. At the same time, a complex debate over legal responsibility began to take shape as Michigan state authorities attempted to make sense of an incident that fell outside conventional frameworks, yet still had to operate within the limits of existing law. And within that context, the Genesee County prosecutor at the time, Arthur Bush, publicly acknowledged that he could not pursue juvenile criminal charges against Dedrick because the boy's age was considered insufficient for a full understanding of the concept of permanent death, nor did it meet the legal standards for intent or calculated action under the justice system.
Presumption that a child 6 years old is not criminally responsible and cannot form the intent to kill necessary to have a criminal prosecution.
At the same time, Arthur Bush stated that he leaned toward the possibility that Dedrick had not properly understood the true nature of the dangerous item in his hands and had instead mistaken it for a toy. Because in his assessment, the child involved was still at an age where he believed in imaginary figures such as Santa Claus or the Easter Bunny. And it was precisely this immaturity that made assigning awareness or intent extraordinarily complex. And in later reflections, prosecutor Arthur recalled that the country at that moment was in an especially tense period, with public sentiment engulfed by shock, confusion, and an urgent need to find answers to a tragedy that lay far beyond society's usual capacity for understanding.
During that period of time, there was a great debate in America about gun control and whether or not there should be an extension of the assault weapons ban.
The ban referenced by the prosecutor had been enacted into law in 1994, but expired after 10 years due to a sunset provision. And from that point forward, through 2023, the United States continued to struggle in its search for answers to tragedies occurring within educational institutions. However, the view of Robert Pickle, the Genesee County Sheriff, stood in stark contrast, as he believed Dedrick still posed a potential risk to the community, arguing that the danger did not hinge on whether the child had intent, but rather on the fact that if he did not truly understand the consequences of his actions, the possibility of future harmful behavior remained. Meanwhile, prosecutor Arthur Bush maintained that responsibility should be centered on the two adults, Jamel Andrew James and Marcus Winfrey, who had allowed dangerous items to exist within a living space shared with children. And during searches of their residence, law enforcement discovered additional evidence connected to harmful substances, other dangerous items previously reported missing, and ammunition. Afterward, the court appointed Douglas Theodore to represent Dedrick. And in their first meeting, he observed that the child appeared unable to fully comprehend the true impact of the chain of events that had unfolded. And while Dedrick understood that he had done something wrong, he believed his actions were merely intended to frighten others rather than cause lasting harm. While legal procedures continued to move forward in an effort to clarify responsibility for the tragedy, the Rolland family entered the moment of saying goodbye to Kayla as she was laid to rest in a small white coffin, her appearance evoking that of a porcelain doll dressed in red, with a white bunny placed beside her. The service unfolding in a quiet yet crowded atmosphere as approximately 1,000 people gathered at the funeral home, many carrying pink ribbons as a symbol of mourning, beside where Kayla lay. Veronica could barely remain standing under the weight of her grief. Elizabeth leaned silently against her mother's shoulder, and Ricky could only whisper words of love to his youngest daughter. After the service and burial, Veronica withdrew from the outside world, living in prolonged isolation and rarely leaving her bed, until days turned into weeks and she slowly began to find the strength to continue. Believing that the memory of her daughter had become the source of strength that helped her rise again, however slowly, and as the family struggled to mend an irreparable loss. The judicial process surrounding the case also began to show clearer progress, focusing increasingly on the responsibility of the adults connected to the death of Kayla Rolland. In March of 2000, Marcus Winfrey was charged in connection with the unlawful possession of dangerous items of illegal origin, while Jamel Andrew James was formally accused of causing severe consequences for leaving an item capable of inflicting serious harm within reach of a young child. And when questioned about this decision, Arthur Bush explained that Jamel had demonstrated extreme negligence and a profound lack of responsibility by failing to secure a dangerous item that was in a ready-to-use condition. In his view, such conduct not only distorted the developmental path of a child too young to understand consequences, but also directly led to the death of an innocent girl. The prosecutor further emphasized that bringing these charges carried a broader message to American society, that objects often perceived as tools of protection, when improperly managed, can instead render communities less safe. And in response to questions surrounding the potential responsibility of other family members, Arthur Bush stated clearly that there was no legal basis to pursue the child's uncle under the same charges. When the preliminary hearing for Marcus Winfrey took place, he appeared under heavy restraint, and when given the opportunity to speak, Marcus argued that although the person he lived with had displayed dangerous items in front of children, it was done in a joking manner and without any intent to distort their understanding or cause harm. Meanwhile, Jamel Andrew James appeared in a dark suit at a separate hearing before Richard Hughes with a calm demeanor. The proceeding lasting only about 10 minutes, during which Jamel spoke very little. After which the judge ordered him held at the Genesee County Jail and set bail at $100,000, an amount far beyond his ability to pay, effectively requiring him to await trial in custody. Not long afterward, Marcus admitted responsibility and was sentenced to a term of 6 to 12 months, while Tamara, the mother who had allowed her 2 sons to live with Marcus and Jamel, maintained that she had been unaware that illegally sourced dangerous items were being kept in the home and was later held accountable for a failure of supervision. And by the end of March 2000, Dedrick and his brother were persuaded to testify in the hearing related to Jamel, a legally sensitive step given that the children were still far too young to fully comprehend the gravity of what was unfolding around them. Before the testimony began, John Conover, a Flint district judge, ordered all video cameras, audio recording equipment, and courtroom sketch artists to leave the courtroom in order to maximally protect the privacy of those involved, who were still far too young. And what the media later described left many people chilled by the realization that the center of this tragedy was, at its core, just a child. Dedrick appeared wearing blue pants and a white buttoned-up shirt, awkwardly climbing onto the witness stand, to the point that those in the courtroom could see only his eyes and the bridge of his nose above the podium, and throughout questioning his responses consisted mostly of shaking his head or whispering so softly that attorneys were forced to repeat each question aloud so the room could hear. Afterward, it was his older brother's turn to testify, and later that same day, Cassie Asher, a medical examiner at Hurley Medical Center, delivered expert testimony stating that Kayla had most likely entered an irreversible condition within just minutes of the serious incident due to catastrophic injury near the heart, further explaining that with such trauma, the victim would not have been able to remain conscious for long. A medical conclusion that effectively closed the door on any speculation about the possibility of reversing the outcome of that fateful morning. Throughout the legal proceedings, Veronica gradually returned to everyday life with a clearer sense of resolve, repeatedly sharing that in her darkest moments. The memory and image of Kayla felt as though they were urging her to stand up and do something to ensure that a similar tragedy would never happen to another child. And from that point on, Kayla increasingly became a symbol in nationwide calls concerning school safety and the regulation of dangerous items. While Veronica transformed her personal grief into social advocacy, a determination that led her to meet with Bill Clinton and to become one of the voices at the Million Mom March held in Washington in May of 2000. At the same time, Jonathan and Elizabeth received psychological therapy to help them confront the overwhelming loss of their sister. However, not long afterward, Veronica entered into a harmful relationship with Michael McQueen, who was later accused of behavior that severely affected both children, resulting in Veronica losing custody and once again falling into emotional collapse. And in September of 2000, before traveling, Judge Judith Fullerton delivered sentencing. Kayla's father, Ricky Rolland, made a statement about the impact of the tragedy on his family, directly condemning Jamel Andrew James for leaving a dangerous item within reach of a child, which led to a tense confrontation in the courtroom. And ultimately, Jamel was sentenced to a term of 2 to 15 years of incarceration, with the first 9 months required to be served in a federal detention facility before eligibility for review. And although the defendant apologized and accepted responsibility upon hearing the sentence, for Ricky those words could not ease the loss his family had been forced to endure.
I figure one day he's gonna, the guy upstairs is gonna give him what he deserves. Yeah. And I mean, I'll never forgive the guy. I mean, that won't happen.
In contrast to Ricky, Veronica was perceived by those around her as someone inclined toward compassion and forgiveness. However, according to Jonathan Rolland in an interview conducted many years later,
it basically destroyed her to the point where she wanted to die, drugs, alcohol, anything she could do to take away the pain. And I don't think she ever really got over that.
Ultimately, the emotional burden carried over many years proved too heavy for Veronica to bear, leading her into a profound personal tragedy and her passing in 2016 at the age of 46, leaving behind a sorrowful testament to the long-lasting consequences that irreparable loss can inflict on a human life. By 2020, Dedrick was 26 years old and still living in the Flint area. And according to public court records, he had been involved in a trespassing incident with 2 other individuals in which personal property was taken. After which, Dedrick accepted a lesser degree of responsibility and was sentenced to 2 years of probation. During this same period, Jonathan and Elizabeth chose to speak publicly, not to reopen old wounds, but to convey a different message, that they had chosen forgiveness, in the hope that Dedrick would come to understand it. And in a symbolic moment, Elizabeth shared on camera a photograph she had carefully preserved, offering a closing note to the story rooted in compassion rather than resentment.
This is the only picture I have of my sister.
According to Jonathan and Elizabeth, the decision to forgive came only after they truly understood and fully recognized the instability and prolonged trauma that marked Dedrick Darnell Owens' childhood. And it was that understanding that allowed them to view the tragedy of years past from a different perspective, no longer solely as the loss suffered by their own family, but also as the consequence of a chain of broken circumstances that another child had been drawn into. And while no one can know how Dedrick is living today, or whether he has found a meaningful path forward in life, Elizabeth's words ultimately closed the story with a simple yet profound hope, that he may learn to live better and not allow the past to define the entirety of his future. As we close the story of Kayla Rolland, what lingers is not only the loss suffered by a single family, but a painful lesson about adult responsibility, about living environments, about supervision, and about the consequences that can follow when indifference is allowed to persist for too long. Because this tragedy did not stem from a single moment, but was the result of multiple overlapping failures within a family, a community, and a broader system. And I hope that through this true crime documentary, each of us can reflect on our own role in protecting children and in building safer spaces for them. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story. If you have any thoughts or emotions you would like to share, please leave a comment as a way to remember Kayla Don't forget to share this video so her story can reach more people. Tap like if you found the content meaningful, and subscribe to the channel to continue accompanying me in the next episodes of True Crime Documentary. Goodbye, and I'll see you again in the stories ahead.